Please welcome to the stage several outstanding industry leaders, including Susan Beth Smith, Marie Crotty, Linda Dong, Colleen Bonial, and moderator Linda Hung.
Hello, everyone. I have to say I can't believe that this is my first SATE conference. I now know what I've been missing all of these years. I've so thoroughly enjoyed learning and listening to all the speakers over the last 2 days. It's been an incredible experience. And if it's not already crystal clear to everybody, diversity is not just a trend. I don't need to go through all of the reasons why, from the workplace, the idea that diversity or embracing diversity fosters innovation, creativity. It helps us with attracting talent and retaining talent, all those things that we need to be successful. But we talked about, the other end of the spectrum, how we are dealing with our clients, the end users, our guests. How would we, as designers in servicing this industry, be able to do our work if we were a homogenous group? We have clients all over the world. We have moving and changing dynamic trends. How would we relate to these business partners and users of our parks and our entertainment destinations? I think it's obviously clear embracing diversity is not just a fad. It is serious competitive advantage that we're talking about. So I'm so honored to be the moderator of this incredible group of 4 women that have all come together. I'm going to start with Colleen Bonial, and she's the president and CEO of Mode Studios right here in Seattle. So Colleen's company, they push the limits of what's possible on stage to make enormous crowds levitate. Linda Dong. Linda, thank you for joining us and coming all the way from Beijing and being part of the SATE conference, also Linda's first SATE event. President and chairman of China Leisure. Her company develops and operates international branded parks and attractions across China. And we have Marie Crotty. Marie Crotty, mechanical engineer and project manager with EXP. EXP provides incredible engineering and lighting services to all types of projects, from theme parks, zoos, aquariums. Anything that's entertainment-based is what they do very well. And I want to say Susan Beth Smith, last but not least, executive producer with the Bizarre Company in Los Angeles. And their company conceives and creates stories that then transcend and become extraordinary experiences for guests of all ages and all over the world. So with that, I look around the room in the last few days, I see a lot of familiar faces. And I think to myself that it's pretty remarkable that people come from all different walks of life and they ended here at SATE. So I'm going to ask these women one at a time what brought them here and what drew them to this industry. So I'll start with you, Colleen.
Okay, so we were talking about our origin stories earlier, and I started in my sophomore year in high school in a theater class, and I was skipping class, so of course, as you do, was sitting on the edge of a stage. It was a dark theater. There was a ghost light. And as I was sitting there, someone had gone up in the booth. They turned on the psych lights, and they turned on whatever rock station was in town, and the psych lights started flashing. And I literally went home and told my dad, this is what I want to do. And he pat me on the head, and he was like, okay, go get him, kiddo. You can do anything you want to do. And I was like, great. And my dad was a huge Springsteen fan. So 3 years later, I called him. I was starting Penn State College. And I called him and told him that I was on tour with Springsteen. And he didn't believe me. He was like, no. And then the next weekend, I called him again and said, no, now we're in Pittsburgh. And he was like, no. And then we got to LA, and I called him, and he was like, what's the name of that hotel you're in? And so he called me back, and he was like, what the heck are you doing in Los Angeles? I was like, I keep telling you, but you're not believing me what I'm telling you. And I was interning, and I was going to school during the week, and I was doing the tour on the weekends. So I did that. I did touring for 3 years and finished. I did finish school, by the way. And then started into theater. I became a master electrician for a theater in Providence, Rhode Island. And then from there, about 5 years later, I went into the film industry and I became a gaffer and a best boy in the film industry. And I did all the movies in Seattle that you can imagine: Free Willy, Sleepless in Seattle, all those like early 90s movies. And then eventually I took an animation class. And when I finished the animation class, I decided that nobody would ever hire me to do what I wanted to do, so I should just start my own company. And that's what I did.
Amazing. Thank you, Colleen. Linda?
So my origin story is a bit more of a circuitous route, and honestly, I never ever imagined that I'd be doing, theme parks and attractions until I was doing it. So when I was 10, I decided I wanted to do business. At 15, I decided I wanted to do finance because it was challenging and it makes a lot of money. So after that, throughout my high school years, I worked really hard towards that goal. Got into Wharton, which feeds the most number of undergraduates into the finance industry. And lo and behold, after graduation, I got into my dream job at Goldman Sachs doing investment banking. And then 4 or 5 years down the line, I realized that I hate finance. It's really soul-sucking. But I had dedicated my formative years to reaching this goal. But finally after 5 years, I was like, no, I can't do this anymore. And based on that experience, I almost went 180 degrees and decided to pursue a passion project. So I did a fashion e-commerce startup, for which I was totally unqualified for and had no experience and no industry, network. So it was fun, but it was a bit of a struggle for the next few years. At that time, my father's company, which does real estate development in China, had a project, a mixed-use retail and entertainment project, commercial project, with a theme park component. And the team was having a lot of problems with that because it's a very international industry and we were a fairly local company. And so I was like, okay, I'll help out. So I started being on calls and I was like, yes, a 1-month-long paid vacation to the top theme parks in the world. That's what I wanted at the time. So it was, I got into the industry and then that was when I really discovered that not only was it amazing and I was very passionate about it, but that it kind of suited both the creative side and the kind of what I was interested in, along with kind of the business side. And so that's when I kind of found my passion for the industry, and I founded China Leisure. So we have, other than the Mall of China project with our theme park there, I will be continuing to do new FECs, water parks, and other attractions throughout China.
Amazing. Thank you. Marie?
So my story kind of just starts off right from the beginning. I have a kind of a family passed down love of theme parks and roller coasters, and often I joke that I've been riding roller coasters since before I was born, because my mom admits to riding a roller coaster before realizing she was pregnant. So it's just how much she loves them. My grandfather loved them. I grew up going spring break trips to Florida, family reunions at Kings Island in Ohio, traveling. Yes, I love Ohio parks. But I'm from Wisconsin, so the first road trip I was allowed to take without my parents and some friends and take their car was to Six Flags in Illinois. So I loved theme parks, and everything I did growing up was, I'm going to do this at a theme park. When I was little and I was doing dance, I'm going to be a dancer performer at a theme park. When I got into middle school and I was playing trombone, it was, I'm going to be a performer at a theme park. But I also had this simultaneous passion about buildings, Legos and drawing house plans, and I would just pore over, my grandfather worked with a company that sold houses, and I would pore through his books of house plans and be like, Grandpa, I like this, how they did this, and I want to change this. So I really thought I wanted to do architecture until I realized how many art classes I was going to have to take. And I was much better at science and math. So I went to MSOE where they have an architectural engineering program. And I thought, perfect, that mixes just what I want to do. But I really had no idea how I was going to get into this industry. It was just a pipe dream, something I said, oh, I'm going to do that at theme parks. Everyone's like, yeah, okay. Until the company that I work at now they come recruiting to my college every year, and they showed the pictures of all the projects they do at the theme parks. And so I was like, where's your sign-up sheet? I'm going to have an interview. And so I've been there ever since.
Thank you. Susan Beth?
I went to art school and found out I was a terrible artist. So I didn't know what I was going to do, and I ended up getting a job at a company that did visual effects, which I enjoyed very much. And it turned out that what they were doing visual effects for were theme parks. It was media for theme parks. I didn't even know what that meant. I had been to Disneyland. That was about it. So unlike you, I had absolutely no knowledge of it at all. So I worked there for a while, and then I ended up working on very high-end commercials for cars and got to travel around and had a lot of fun doing that. But, not quite the thing. So I was looking around, and I stayed doing that. And one day, one of our car clients said, hey, are you guys interested in doing the car shows? And I started working on these big, giant car shows in Detroit and New York and wherever. And I thought it was so much more fun because we were creating environments and we were making these places. And again, no theme park, had no idea what any of that was. But I really liked the idea of these places and these environments that we got to create for everybody. And I called them, I don't know that the term immersive environment existed at the time, but that is what they were. And then one day, we got a call that said, hey, how would you guys like to work on a parade at a theme park? And we had absolutely no idea what that even involved or what it meant. So I looked around for help, and somebody referred me to somebody who referred me to somebody named Adam Bizark. And I called up Adam, and Adam came to our charrette, which of course I didn't know that term either. And we didn't end up doing the parade, but I was intrigued and kept doing auto shows. And then a couple of years later, I called up Adam Bizark and I said, what is this? Tell me more about theme parks. And he did, and he was such a spokesperson for it. He was so enthusiastic. He really got my interest and my attention, even though I still didn't know anything about theme parks. But I was interested, and I ended up going to my very first TEA event, and I don't even know if it was called a mixer, and it was at the old Super 78 studio in Hollywood on Santa Monica Boulevard, and I fell in love because everybody there was interesting. Everybody there was doing something different, and all the projects I heard about sounded absolutely fascinating. And it took a while. I mean, that wasn't an instant, just because it was instant love didn't mean that that's what I started doing the next day. But eventually, after a lot more of the media and the content production and all that, I did end up getting to work on a couple of projects, and I was absolutely, I can't explain it. It wasn't like there was a thing about it that made me feel the love that I did, but I loved the variety about it. I wasn't a theme park person, as we all know. But I loved the theming. I loved the placemaking. I loved the fact that you could go to these places wherever they were and have these experiences. And that's what appealed to me the most. And I've kind of stayed in it in different ways ever since.
Thank you. So here we have 4 different women, different and couldn't be more diverse backgrounds in how we found this passion for our industry. But what's in common that I'm hearing is that all of these 4 panelists, they knew what they loved. You know what you're good at, you know what you're not good at, and you just dove right in. They take that chance and they do something that's very different from a lot of other businesses. But with that, with all the experts and the experience and the entrepreneurs, I'm sure that there are a lot of challenges I can only imagine along the way. So I'm going to start with Susan Beth. If you can think of one challenge you'd want to share with the audience.
I was afraid to talk, and I couldn't.
That's
speak.
hard to imagine.
I
Susan
know.
Beth, honestly.
I know, but it's true. I could not speak up. I had no voice. I was afraid to speak. I could sit in meetings, and if you were asking me information, I could speak. But if you asked me what I thought or my opinion, it took me a very long time to be able to do that. And one of the reasons I was afraid to speak, which is relevant to all this subject matter, is that I'd get talked over. And getting talked over made me quieter and made me less wanting to speak. And this went on for a long time. And I would sometimes watch things, if I did manage to say something, sometimes those suggestions would get attributed to somebody else in the meeting, usually male. And I wasn't resentful, I just didn't know what to do. That's really the bottom line. I didn't know how to cope with that.
So now, like all these years later, if you would look back in a situation like that, what would you do? Like,
that's
what would you do
easy.
differently?
I would have spoken up sooner, and I would have just made myself do it, because I could talk about things. I could talk about information. And what happened also is that by the time I eventually did speak up, things changed and people listened. And again, to mention the name Adam Bizark, Adam listened, and the whole company listened. And I felt like I had a voice. And I was able to talk, and I was able to start encouraging others to talk as well. And I'm in an environment now where people's opinions, everybody's opinions, are solicited. You don't have to worry that you're going to say something and say the wrong thing or a stupid thing. It's okay.
Very good.
I was going to say, when we were talking about this topic before we first met and talked about it, I said, oh, Susan Beth stole mine. So that's what I said. And I had similar experiences. And actually, before coming here, I talked to some of the women in our office, and they had similar stories and similar experiences. And it was funny to see the video, the Pixar video that we watched yesterday.
Yeah.
I was like, well, there goes our whole talk. You know, like that little pink ball of yarn, that was me.
Yes.
That's the girl who sits next to me.
Right.
And we've talked about like the joke. I don't think I mentioned this before, but like the jokes that I've had in meetings. A guy will say, "Oh, I got this joke," and he'll start to tell the joke, and he'll be like, "Well, not in mixed company," and he'll turn to the guys, "I'll tell you later." I was like, "Well, I want to know the joke too. I probably will think it's funny too." So I was like, "Guys, don't stop yourselves because of mixed company. If you have a funny joke, everyone wants to hear it." But in that same kind of meeting setting with that same team, I would find myself saying something, and the person who was leading or was talking, he would keep thinking his thought process, and he wouldn't hear what I said until I had a friend who was sitting next to me. He was male, and he noticed that like we weren't addressing what Marie said, and he would repeat it, just kind of like see what happened, and he'd be like, "Oh, that's a good idea," and he would go, "Oh, it was Maria's idea. It was Marie's idea." And we kind of made like a little game of it. I'm like, "Eugene, say this." And he'd be like, "Oh, it's Marie's idea." So kind of to the what would you do different, it's okay to reach out to a friend or an advocate who you know is going to, kind of speak up for you until you find your own voice.
Yeah.
And then as we were realizing this dynamic, like it became easier and more normal for me to just say what I wanted to say. It kind of goes back to what Ariel's been saying about the psychology of comfort and feeling safe, and feeling psychologically safe to say what you wanted to say.
Yeah, those are great examples of simple but very positive change in the workplace, which then segues into my next question about if you can name an example of how embracing diversity has made your project, your work more successful. I'm going to start with Colleen.
So
We've pivoted recently in the last year or so, and we've brought on new team members. So Mode, which was a 2-person team, is now a 7-person team. And we are diverse in ethnicity and religion and age and genders, sexual preference, the whole everything. But what makes us most diverse is what we do for a living. So we're also architects and production designers and creative directors and producers and theatrical engineers. So we all bring something different to the table. And I think that the best part about that is that we all have a voice at the table, but we all come together and the voice that we show the client is one. And we work very hard at that. So there's a lot of yelling at the initial table, but we settle our differences and move on from there.
Good.
Yeah.
So from the client side, I guess, in terms of having a more diverse, I guess, the design consultants and all these consultants for our project is actually very important. Because out in China, while we have a very kind of mature production industry in terms of design and creativity, we still mostly rely on international consultants and design firms like Forrec. And for the most part, everyone's very, very experienced, and I guess like 90% of the experience of what customers do in theme parks are very similar. But there are culture differences in a different market. There are language differences, and there are, habits that are different. And so what we found, for example, was that based on the program mix of thrill rides, family rides, kiddie rides, it was a very balanced mix for, a US theme park. But in China, because it's a rather nascent industry, a lot of people are not quite so much on the thrill factor. And also the family unit is very important. And so for a lot of the theme park goers, they would be very family oriented. So then for that, our team, we decided we're like, hey, no, we can't go based on what international kind of program mix would be. We need to skew a little bit more towards the family and tone down a little bit on the coasters. And then another example was we have a great interior consultant, but unfortunately, they are all male. So they came up with this beautiful design for a bathroom. It's like Chanel-inspired, monochromatic mirrors, super elegant basins, and they were very proud of the work, and it was really good. But at the end, I was like, okay, that's great. I have one question. Where do I put my purse? So if you're creating public bathrooms at shopping malls for the female customer, what are the needs of the customer? So from my side and seeing a lot of the work product, that's when it's more about the diversity in the team in terms of being able to create products that work for the guests that we ultimately open for.
Good.
That's interesting because I don't know where it really came from, but from as long as I can remember, we've always looked for, whenever we were working in any other culture, wherever it was, we wanted not translators, but interpreters, people who understood the culture that we were working in, and more than just being able to say, I don't think you mean this word, but really explaining context, really being part of the creative process all the way through from the beginning so that we understood not just what's a joke or what's not funny, but really how to reach out and how to appeal in the storytelling. And I think that was that just worked right away. And at one point, and this is more recent, we wanted somebody who knew about African culture. And it wasn't enough to just, let's just go find somebody. We didn't do that. We found a museum curator at an African museum who was able to really look at, think about, and comment on, in a very collaborative way, what we were saying, what our designs were, what everything was. And it wasn't a process like, okay, tell us what you think and then go away. We just kept going, and I find that very rewarding. I find that to be why I have such a good feeling about the future of this whole industry. We're all heading in a direction where we're listening to a lot of different voices.
Thank you. I'm going to jump to the next question. This was a tough one, but do you feel you need to work harder than your peers because of your diversity? So maybe I'll start with Marie on this one.
I wasn't so much thinking it was harder, but it is a little bit different, or it has been. And I had two examples. Was one when in the diversity sense of age, when I first started, I felt like I really, really needed to work hard to prove what I knew, and sometimes I would work overnight to make sure I hit a deadline, and I was too shy to ask the questions because I didn't want to look like I didn't know what I was doing, and I would always make sure that I left before the first person I knew was coming in. We have someone who comes in at like 5 a.m., and so I would always make sure I was out of there before he got in, and people wouldn't know that I had worked all night. So in that sense, I was working very hard, but I thought that was my own fault, or it wasn't because someone made me. It was like I wanted to do a good job, and I didn't want anyone to know how much I was struggling at trying to keep up. And then as a second point, I talk all the time about my two little girls. They're 2 and 5. And so I have lots of fun stories, too, that I've been cracking these ladies up with a bit. And they've been on some of our phone calls because they won't go to bed. But as a new mom, when I was learning to balance things, I did have a male coworker notice that I was falling behind on responding to emails, or not responding as fast as they thought I should be, and said, how do you balance this? Do you go home and do you work at night, or could you? And I was kind of like, I just can't. You have my 9 hours. I'm not taking a lunch break. You have me from this time to this time. But as a mom, I have assumed the stereotypical roles at home. And when I get home, I'm going to make dinner. I'm going to put the kids to bed. And when they go to bed, I'm going to go back and do the dishes. And if there's any energy left, I might fold some laundry. So I was like, no, I'm not going to go home and have dinner with the family and then go to my office and keep working. I'm going to work as efficiently as I can and delegate as best I can, and I will do the best job I can during this time, and then I'm going to go home and I'm going to work my second shift, is kind of what I jokingly told them. And again, I've been there since out of college, so I had that safety to be able to say, I have to draw some lines here for the survival of everyone around me.
I think that's a pretty incredible dedication. If Dan Chrisman were here, Marie's boss, he'd be listening hard. So I'm going to ask, Colleen, go ahead.
For just a second. I have learned how to work differently in the last few years. I have always been a leader who has led from the sidelines. I've cheered my team on. I've always sort of pushed them where they needed to go. And over the last 2 years, I'm really sort of learning how to step up, how to find my voice, how to lead people on instead of pushing them forward. And it's a completely different way of looking at it, and it's a completely different skill set. So it's not as easy as it looks, actually. So I just wanted to add that.
Yes.
I think I'm learning that too. Like I'm getting there.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah, so I think it's very interesting why a lot of women and minorities actually feel the need to have to work harder, and I kind of just wanted to explore that a little bit, because everyone really has different drivers for that type of behavior. And for me, being born into a Chinese family, there's a Chinese idiom that basically, it sounds better in Chinese, so that it says value men and undervalue women. And so, even as a kid, and even though I was schooled in Vancouver, all throughout, school and society, they put you into gender stereotypes or, expect you to fulfill, certain gender roles. And it's very much unconscious, and I don't think anyone's deliberately trying to do it. So, for example, when I was in the 3rd grade, my school put on a production of Alice in Wonderland. And being the teacher's pet, my teacher pulled me aside and was like, okay, so what character do you want to play? Very seriously, I told him, I want to be the White Rabbit. And then he looked really confused. He was like, why would you want to be the White Rabbit? I said, because the White Rabbit has the most number of lines to memorize, and I want to memorize lines. And then he's like, but the White Rabbit is a boy's role. And I'm like, it's a rabbit. And he was like, and he was like, no, trust me, all the girls, they want to be Alice. You want to be Alice. And lo and behold, he cast me as Alice. So it's okay to have an Asian Alice, but not a female white rabbit. Being at 10 years old, I was like, okay, great, I'm going to be Alice. But as I grew up, I started not to conform to that. And what happens is that in order to break free from the gender stereotypes, you end up having to fight. And you have to work harder, you have to be louder, and you have to be pushy and assertive. And that kind of just, that cycle kind of repeats itself. So when I started work, I felt the obligation to have to overdo everything. In finance was just male-dominated. I decided that I set a rule for myself. I will always be the last one out of the office. Nobody told me to do that. Nobody said, we're worried that you won't be able to keep up because you're a woman. But that's something that I felt the pressure to end up doing. So I ended up working 100-hour work weeks. And so that's probably why I hated finance. But even when I transitioned into a leadership role, it was the pressure I felt of managing people who are oftentimes 20, 30 years my senior. Also, real estate's also a very male-dominated role industry. So there was a lot of pressure. Nobody else gave me that pressure, but in terms of just having that feeling of having to overdo everything, creates a lifestyle that, to be honest, I know it's not healthy and it's not great, but it's just there.
Thank you. We have so much more to share. I might leave it for the Q&A because I see we're sort of running out of time now. But I want to close very quickly with telling a story with a few numbers. This is the easiest way for me to do it. So I have a slide here that's going to pop up very quickly. I think, so hold on a second. So actually, it started with a question, and what does diversity mean to our bottom line? Because in the end, we all have our businesses to run. There's so much information out there and reports written, to comb through, but my favorites in the last decade are these two reports that are showing up behind me. If you've ever taken a look at the McKinsey reports, in 2004, they gathered information from basically 4 different regions, US, Canada, the UK, and Latin America, and they did this across 366 countries. Then later on, they validated that information 3 years later with another report from 2008 and talked about their findings. And this is what they say. So if you take a look at diversity and how it relates to financial performance, some of us are all numbers out there, and it's saying something pretty important. If we take a look at an issue like gender diversity, the first bar on the left is, if you take a look at the women in leadership roles, like your executive team, if you rank in the bottom quartile, meaning the lowest 25%, as opposed to if your company ranked in the top quartile, the top 25%, your likelihood of being a better performing company is 15% higher that you're going to have better revenue, better profitability. It's pretty impressive. Let's take a look at what their report says 3 years later when they did this study. If you ranked in the bottom quartile, 45%, 55% at the top quartile. These are EBIT, by the way, earnings before interest and taxes, and that's a representation of your profitability against your gross revenue. And it jumps up to 21%. It's pretty telling. These facts are out there. Let's take a look at executive ethnic diversity by quartile, your lower half, your lower quarter compared to your top quartile. 35% that you're going to be a more profitable company if you have more ethnic diversity in your workplace, on your executive team. 3 years later, what does it say? Pretty consistent. So there are other numbers in these reports, and I won't get into them. Maybe if we have a chance later on, I'd love to share this information with anyone who's interested in it. But businesses need to be serious about diversity to stay ahead. That's pretty obvious for all of us. And so we're going to go into Q&A here, but I would like to thank my 4 panelists for not just being leaders and mentors in this industry and being so amazing and being here, even though I had to drag them out with me. So I was so proud of all of them. And I wanted to thank the TIA and SATE because this is so important of a topic to all of us and uplifting us to be here to share with you. So, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, yes. Hi.
So much. That was so amazing. I actually just have one major question for you guys. Maybe two. Oh, there's one from the audience, too. So, what was your most meaningful failure? Only time for this one question. Now I read that. Damn, I have good. So, what was your only what was your most meaningful failure? Colleen, you want to start?
I'll start. I was working on a feature film called Assassins with Sylvester Stallone in it. And I was the only female on the crew. And when I say on the crew, I mean not hair and makeup, but like with the camera and on the crew. And I became sport for them. Like it was kind of brutal, actually. And I cried in the bathroom. And that was a safe place for me because I was the only female there. So I would cry in the bathroom, I'd throw water on my face, and I'd head back out. And the woman producer who hired me for this gig one day stepped out of the stall and said, "What's up?" And I actually told her, which was, at the time, a catastrophic thing to do. They stopped production on the film for 2 days and gave us harassment training.
Wow.
Amazing.
So it was a brutal 2 days, and I can tell you that my life on that crew didn't get any easier, and I quit. We were shooting on the monorail, and there was a ladder going up to, we had stopped the monorail like midway, and there was a ladder that you could go up and down to get in and out of the monorail. And I quit on the monorail, and then I had to climb down the ladder to get away from them. And I'm terrified of heights. So it was the scariest thing I ever did was walk down that ladder. But ultimately, that was the end of my career in the film industry. I sort of went out with a bang, and I've never looked back. I mean, I just took all the knowledge and said, thank you very much. I'm moving on and doing other things.
Very good.
So, yeah, thank you.
Mary Beth.
I
I want to ask. Go
Susan
ahead.
Beth, did you?
No.
Okay.
That would take me too long to come
Okay.
up with the right one.
I'll jump in. I have something, personal that I think back. It's one of those things that I reflect on often. Is my early days working. I do a lot of travel, business development, but in the early days I didn't. And as work was starting to grow in Asia and China, I would hear things like, "You can't go because you're Asian," and they don't want to see an Asian face there. They're expecting someone who's Caucasian. And I thought, I used to think that was really weird because I can connect. I'm Chinese, I think I can help, and I would do well in that environment. But I never spoke up at that time. I used to think, okay, they're probably right, and I just keep working, trying to hone in on my skills and get better. But really what I should have gone back and said is, how would you know? Right. Did you survey them? Like, how do you know what they want, right?
Yeah.
Back then, I think we assumed what our clients wanted from us and didn't really know. But times have changed, and we've made huge leaps and bounds, and I think we think differently now. So that's an amazing thing that I see. So.
Linda, I wanted to ask you a question. What message would you give a younger version of yourself, knowing what you know today?
Oh, there's a lot. But in terms of, I think, like having had that experience and always having to constantly, fight. I feel like I was too stubborn. I thought I knew what I wanted. I thought I knew everything going in. And I prepared a lot, and that's kind of how I got the confidence. But in terms of being a lot more open, I think, to new opportunities. I mean, I was like, I want to do business at 10, you know?
Yeah.
But in terms of being able to keep an open eye for opportunity, I learned that too late. So I kind of went to a very circuitous route before I found out what I really wanted to do. So, you know, as a younger version of myself, I would definitely say, you know, be much more open to opportunity, be more receptive, be less stubborn, and potentially not be, you know, fight everything so much, and feel the need to be, you know, super protective. I think I would have had a much more balanced life and happier, I think.
Thank you very much. Ladies, thank you so much. I so appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
It's really quick. I just want to encourage everybody to reach out to the next generation coming in, whether it's at an event or not, and really encourage people to apply and to, you may not have a job for them at the moment, but get to know them, help them if you can. One of the greatest pleasures in what I do is being able to do that as much as I can. So please reach out.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, ladies.